Today we're going to be making this effect where I transform into a different shirt with a fiery explosion shockwave. The process we use for this effect also works really well for teleportation or other magical impacts. To perform this effect, we start by lining up the action of both of the shots, and then we use a slightly feathered mask that expands to transition from one shot to another. And then on top of that, I have a Video Copilot Shockwave asset that I applied the VC Video Copilot Color Vibrance effect to, which gives us this large, fiery, glowing shockwave. Then, to emphasize the impact of the transformation, I add an Optical Flare. I have it appear for one frame, maybe two, at really low brightness, and then really crank it up for the actual transformation, and then make it totally disappear 2 frames later. The flare obscures the frames where the shockwave appears out of nowhere, so we can trim off more of the beginning of the shockwave to make it spread and appear faster. Then we can mask out this piece of the foreground and put it above our shockwave so that the shockwave can go behind the counter where it's supposed to be. Right now the shockwave doesn't really blend well with the rest of the footage, and lowering its opacity doesn't look good at all. The problem is that the shockwave isn't really casting light on the rest of the shot like we would expect. To fix this, we can duplicate the shockwave, add a blur effect to it, and then duplicate our footage layer, put it above the blurred shockwave, and select Track Matte, Luma Matte. A Luma Matte will make it so that the pixels apply more to brighter pixels on the original footage. If we set that layer to add now, we get a lighting effect that's brighter on areas that the original footage was brighter on. You could further adjust this by changing the brightness and contrast of the footage that we're using as the track matte. Now I want to add more detail to this explosion, so I added some particles using Trapcode Particular. These are high velocity with a high particle count on an explode event emitter, with the color shifting from orange to red over time, and an auxiliary system that emits particles from other particles, and that results in the spark trails that we see. I also have some air resistance with a high amplitude and low frequency, which makes it so that the sparks slow down after they explode and also flow around the air a bit. I do a little bit of tweaking on the look of these by changing the number of particles, changing the lengths of the streaks by lowering the lifetime of the auxiliary particles, and making some other adjustments. Next is the displacement shockwave. I use this in a lot of effects, but essentially all you have to do is get a layer, apply fractal noise to it, and then use some circular masks to animate a ring of fractal noise that rapidly expands over a couple frames. Position it and time it correctly, and then pre-compose that layer. Then you can duplicate your original footage. This is so that any pixels that we displace that are on the edges of the shot don't end up going black. Then add the displacement map effect on your top footage layer, select your shockwave layer, set the mode to luminance, and increase the displacement to whatever value you think looks good. This is going to make it so that it looks like a ripple is passing through the world itself and really helps the impact of the shot. Whenever I'm doing a tripod shot like this, I usually like to pre-compose all my footage, zoom it in a little bit, and then apply a wiggle expression to the position. That'll just add a little bit of fake camera motion that can sometimes make it look a little more natural. But we can also use the second parameter of this expression and tie it to a slider control effect on the footage, which makes it so that we can animate how much the footage is going to wiggle. Since this is an impact shot, you might expect a handheld camera to be affected by the shockwave, so we can animate that up, make it so that the camera sort of jerks just a little bit when the shockwave happens. And there we have it, the fiery transformation effect. I'll be making more breakdowns of some of the other effects in that video, so stay tuned for some more of these.